What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 381 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher here with Drew Dinkmeyer to talk about the 3-0 Boston lead. And Dink, I'm going to hit you with a stat real quick. 448. That's how many Luka Doncic games we've seen in his career. Last night was the very first time he fouled out in regulation. He had two other foul outs, both were overtime. Can't do it. So big story there. We'll start talking about with that here. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Coming off another fun night of NBA DFS Showdown where I found a unique lineup to take home another 30K. So that's always a fun start. Missing the depth of these finals. I would love more games to be able to keep firing, but it looks like we're not going to get those. Understand Luka's frustrations, and he's not a player that commits a ton of fouls normally, but it's ultimately not what the difference in this game was. Ultimately Dallas has been kind of dominated throughout this entire series, and Luka can say like game 2 he made too many turnovers and that's why they lost, and game 3 it was bad foul calls and that's why they lost or whatever. But ultimately, like, they're kind of getting worked in this series, and it's 3-0 in a convincing fashion. Boston did everything they could to give Dallas a shot in the fourth quarter of last night's game. And Dallas made a valiant effort in spite of not having Luka Doncic there to close. But Dallas has really been kind of running uphill this entire series.
And yeah, should shout out you just really quick. I mean, you were traveling all day, and you go out and you bink DraftKings. Just talk about that. Like, how did like your, I don't know, how have you been killing it? Honestly, like, you've just been on it every day. Like, I was like, oh man, I hope Dig doesn't quit, just plays DFS full time with how he's been crushing.
No.
But yeah, just not to bring the attention to you, but man, you've been crushing it. Do you have anything you kind of want to? We talk about a lot of stuff, but our bread and butter is kind of DFS and stuff. But what have you been doing that's just been helping you crush so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's lovely to be able to play DFS in the playoffs. During the regular season with so much projection work going on around lock, I'm not able to really play as much. So being able to play in the playoffs, I'm able to focus. There's less injury situation. Last night we obviously had to deal with the Porzingis injury.
Mm-hmm.
There's less injury situations to monitor and have to adjust news on. And then I think from a showdown perspective in these slates, a lot of times people are playing lineups that are heavily duplicated, and something we talk about on our premium shows all the time, just trying to find ways to be unique. Last night, the winner ended up being a team that left, I think, like $700 to $900 salary on the table, played lively with Gafford. That's ultimately the difference maker in terms of rounding out a win. So, yeah, I've run well in the playoffs for sure, but it's nice to be able to have the time to play. And these games that are like pure game theory mixed with a little bit of like rotation prediction stuff, I think is really fun. And obviously, like, we had a really big position against Maxi Kleber last night that worked out really well. Had some surprises in terms of the first rotations. Xavier Tillman playing over Luke Cornett was certainly a surprise for us. But ultimately, like, a lot of those guys down at the 2000 level in Showdown, they don't make a big difference. Like, they have to score so much to make a big difference, especially in these series with the Celtics guys and the balanced scoring. So if you kind of take a lot of those plays off the table, you can get into better lineups that leave some salary and create more uniqueness on the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, you had the board cover, just masterful play by you. Well done. I feel pretty good about my takes. I didn't think anything, went a little bit. But one thing I did, my biggest win last night was the Luka Doncic. I mentioned in our Slack, I'm waiting for this review, and I get a gazillion notifications. So the first beat to say challenge upheld, I was like, okay, I had the slip ready to go, and I bet Boston minus 3.5. I saw Windhorse go off. Check that out. Anyone who has it, that was, I mean, my God. And my first reaction, and I have a funny feeling you had the same thought. That defense was so bad. Imagine Jokic like letting his team down like that. I just can't do it. So I don't know. The whole like Luka better, like, that was my first thought when I heard Windhorse, and I thought about it during the game too. But I mean, that was tough, man. Like, you can't do that. You complain. Windhorse is too good. I'm not gonna say anything. Just go watch that.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, 448 games, first time ever, biggest game of his life, and he fouls out like that. You just can't do that, man. When you're getting hunted like that. Perhaps probably the craziest quote that I heard last night was Jason Kidd said that he needs to find spots to rest on offense. So that like maybe perk up, but yeah, just reaction from Luka fouling out and basically just killing his team.
Yeah, there's so many different things that come to mind to comment on. First and foremost with Windhorst, the guy is just incredible with a flair
So
for the
good.
dramatic on these spots and these hits. Obviously, like the Donovan Mitchell Utah Jazz trade speculation from a few years ago, the fingers in the air. This hit, all really, really strong. I found it funny, and I was telling producer Ryan before this, before we went on, I found it funny that earlier in the series, Windhorst was on Zach Lowe's podcast and basically like didn't understand how Zach Lowe remembered all the different aspects of what was going on in the game. And Zach Lowe's, what do you
Hmm.
like? What do you mean? I write down notes, and that's how I know everything. And
Hmm.
Windhorst is like, oh, I like tuned out for like 6 minutes in the second quarter. There, it was just uninteresting to me. It's just
So
like it's
good.
so funny for Windhorst to be ridiculing Luka's effort on defense, but then in Game 1 of the NBA Finals, in his job, he's like, yeah, I just tuned out for a while. No big deal. So kind of funny the the push and pull there. But Luka, obviously, you compare to Jokic or other players. Jokic has obviously been put on an island in a lot of these big spots against elite
Hmm.
perimeter players, and he's been made to look foolish, as Rudy Gobert was made to look foolish in the series before this, as a lot of bigs are made to look foolish with the skill level of the perimeter players. Steph Curry got Jokic a number of times earlier in his career, and that was the emphasis: was would he be good enough defensively to kind of allow. And look, there's more defensive responsibility on a center than there is on a wing, just
Hmm.
naturally in the league. But we're seeing Luka get hunted in a way that, I mean, if you asked me coming into this series what players I was most concerned about getting hunted and isolated offensively in the series, I think the first names that would have come to mind would have been Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, Kyrie Irving, and then maybe Luka. And honestly, it hasn't even been close. I mean, Luka's been
Hmm.
the biggest defensive liability out there by a wide, wide margin. And so I
Hmm.
think the commentary that Brian Windhorst made yesterday rings true that if Luka Doncic is going to want to win championships, and this Dallas roster is flawed, it's not a perfect championship level roster, but if he's going to win championships, he's going to need to get to average on the defensive end in these spots. Now, to Luka's credit, he's playing through some injuries right now. Who knows how much that's
Hmm.
impacting him? The Jason Kidd commentary about needing to find him rest on offense is just an indication of how much he's being attacked on defense, which is the
Hmm.
huge issue that they have, right? Like Boston is just inflicting body blow after body blow after body blow on these drives at Luka because they're wearing him down late in the game. His fourth quarter numbers in the series have been absolutely abysmal.
Hmm.
Turning the ball over a ton, not scoring a lot, not getting to the free throw line, settling for bad jumpers. It's been bad for Luka in the fourth quarter of the series, and I think that's in part because he's getting worn down by being attacked so much on the defensive end, and so that's absolutely an area of his game that he's going to need to take a big step forward. We talk a lot of times about, um, we talked about the youth of Anthony Edwards, right, being just 22, and you don't usually see 22-year-olds kind of elevate their teams into these championship level spots. Luka's what, 25? So, I mean, usually we're seeing 27, 28. That's where, Brown and Tatum are. That's where Jokic was. That's usually where you see, and these guys have to go through the trials and tribulations of the playoffs to kind of elevate themselves. And so I think this will hopefully be a really good learning experience for Luka. We saw a couple of years ago with Jokic, he came back in incredible shape after sort of
Hmm.
an embarrassing playoff exit. And I wonder if we see that from Luka Doncic at some point. Obviously, this year with the Olympics, a little bit of a challenging offseason and whatnot, but I wonder if we see a Luka Doncic like come back, next year or the year after in much much better physical condition that allows him to play more aggressively defensively.
Yeah, definitely curious to see if we have any like knee cleanups or any cleanup surgeries. Which Draymond talked about on his podcast. Like going to the finals and losing is tough. You lose all that time and you don't get to really
Yep.
rehab. You cut your summer way short to relax. You and I, we don't even step foot on the court, and we get
Yeah.
worn down just from talking about basketball. So yeah, it's tough scene. I don't really have anything else to say on Luca. He played mostly well on offense. He drove a pretty good bit. That was something I was watching. Was pretty aggressive with his shot selection, which I like to see. Which I guess I want to pivot to Kyrie. Actually, I want to talk about the other stat that jumps out the most to me. Every day I wake up and I look at catch and shoot points, and last night was no different. 39-12 catch and shoot points. Edge Boston, obviously. That puts the season series at 3 games, 101-30 in catch and shoot points. That is just out of this world. You cannot make that
Yeah.
up. The other point we made, which was, hey, Ryan, clip that. I was like, hey, Dallas has to score 105, and if not for the free throws at the end of the game, 105 would have won in the game. So they're just fighting so far uphill. This is just such a domination from a game plan standpoint. I don't know, man. Like this is twice now. They probably should have won and didn't. But any thoughts on how they could just neutralize this? Can they? Like this, you can't get tripled up on catch and shoot stuff.
So in the first half, it felt like Dallas was playing with a lot more energy. It felt like Kyrie
Mm-hmm.
was playing really well. And every time you looked at the scoreboard, the game was still really tight. And so
Mm-hmm.
you had this feeling of almost everything is going Dallas's way, with the exception of Boston isn't shooting the ball terribly. They're shooting the ball decently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not, Dallas isn't able to separate in any way, shape, or form. They're getting to the rim, they're getting paint points, Kyrie's going off, all these things are happening in a positive way, and they're just not able to separate on the scoreboard. And that's the nature of this math problem that Joe Mazzulla stresses over and over and over again, which is if we get up more 3-point attempts than our opponents with the quality of the shooters that we have, we're going to build a math advantage over them that it's going to be kind of an avalanche when those threes start falling. And that's been the case in the last two games. It's really been able to separate Boston in the second half of these games is when those threes have started falling. They've started to really separate. And I thought Boston did a great job upping their intensity defensively in the third quarter when they went on that big run. It was just a dominant third quarter from Boston on both
Mm-hmm.
ends. And they just wear you down. The drive and kick, drive and kick, drive and kick. You're constantly in rotation. You're expending a lot of energy defensively, kind of chasing the ball because Dallas hasn't been able to keep the ball in front of them. That's been the whole issue with the series, which is what we podcasted on last time. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
Dallas cannot keep the ball in front of them, and as a result, they're constantly in chase, and as a result, they're giving up really high quality shots. And that shot quality advantage is just so tough to overcome. We thought maybe if Kristaps was injured, maybe that would improve the shot quality of Dallas. And I think it did. I thought they got more stuff at the rim. But the gap in terms of the shot quality is so big that it's really hard to see Dallas, overcoming that. Certainly in a 4-5 situation, as we were talking about on Monday, but now 4 in a row, it seems nearly impossible for them to be able to overcome that shot quality gap 4 straight games against this Boston team.
Yeah, just unfair, and just heavy isolation from Dallas, and just great ball movement all around. They did neutralize transition. That was a big improvement. Dallas like kind of played the best they could. I thought defensively. It's just Boston's formula is just way better. It's like they're playing another game out there. I guess we should talk about like. Did you have you're more into like, oh, Boston, here we go again? Were you kind of getting those vibes?
Yeah.
Where were you at when Dallas went on this huge run? Did you like up? Where was your head? Where's your head at when like Boston looked like they were going to blow it again?
I think it's where I saw Seth Partnow tweeting about this as well. I think it's where most people are. It's just like, come
Mhm.
on, Boston. Like you guys got this. You guys have been playing so well throughout the first 2 3/4 of this series, 2 3/4 games of the series. And now up 21 in the fourth quarter, we're going to get into this ISO step back 2-point contested
Mhm.
shot. I mean, Peyton Pritchard taking 20-foot contested twos.
Mhm.
I don't care how much you're up. Like this is the NBA Finals. You got to cut that stuff out. I
Mhm.
thought it was interesting earlier in the game when the mic caught Jason Tatum talking about how we need to keep driving the ball. We need to stop settling
Mhm.
for, fadeaway, contested fadeaway jumpers and whatnot. And he even highlighted, he said that myself included, like I need to do a better
Mhm.
job of this as well, which I thought was a good level of awareness and attention. But yeah, they went through a 5-minute stretch that was just putrid in terms of Boston. It's just the
Mhm.
stuff that drives us nuts about Boston. But I mean, it's 5 minutes of a series so far that they've largely played really well. I mean, of 144 minutes, I'd say 5 minutes of them they've played
Mhm.
that way. In the other 139 minutes, they've played pretty aggressively. And there were moments down the stretch where Tatum had a nice drive and finish in the final like 2 or 3 minutes of the game that put them back up 4 or 6. And that was a sign of growth in terms of taking the ball to the basket. Jaylen Brown hit it kind of a fadeaway jumper that really kind of sealed things. It seemed like down the stretch there, and so they got the ball back in the hands of their best players. But I thought they were a little bit rushed in that period, and that's the thing that we all complain about with Boston. The difference with Boston now, and I think come and I owe a big mea culpa on this, right? I took Mavs in 7, and that's not even going to be close.
Mhm.
And I think I was over indexing for these fears or these frustrations with Boston
Mhm.
in terms of just focusing too much on those issues when in reality, all of those issues that I had with Boston in terms of their willingness to settle for contested isolation scores that's how Dallas gets all their stuff. So
Mhm.
I was like over indexing on Boston in their ability to create better shots with Dallas, who's going to be forced into these type of shots, and that was just a bad read by me. But yeah, I think just generally, Boston has these spans that they can play with a lack of focus and a lack of attention to detail, and that allows other teams to get back into it. To their
Mhm.
credit, though, they closed strong in this game
Yep.
and took care of business, and so in that was, we've all talked about Boston clutch situations throughout the
Mhm.
Indiana series. They took care of every clutch situation. They've taken care of clutch situations in game 2 and game 3 of the series. So at this point, it's like this was the best regular season team all year long. We can argue whether the gap in the leagues or in the conferences, in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, may have amplified that. But they've rolled through the playoffs as well. You can argue, well, they haven't played the best teams. Whatever, they've played what's in front of them, and they've taken care of everybody all year long. This has been the best team in the league, and they're one game away from winning a title that's very well deserved.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was kind of going through all the net ratings and clutch times over the playoffs, and like of sample, that's like the best since the 2011 Mavericks. Interestingly, 50 minutes of clutch time for them, they were plus 60 net rating. But Boston, 24 minutes of clutch time plus 46.9 net rating. They've been good whenever the chips are down, man. So you know, kind of we love to, make fun of them because they did it all the time in the regular season. But, when they've played with the Indiana series, they played really well. This series, they've been able to
Yeah,
close out. So I think they've played great, which we should get. I mean, we're, 16 minutes into the pod and we're kind of just getting to Jaylen Brown, who just
yeah,
made so many big plays again and the driving again, 10 passes off drives again. Like he just puts such an imprint on this game. He's like minus 350 for Finals MVP, which I agree with. He's pretty much got if this series goes 4 or 5, he's gonna win. But yeah, what do you even see from Jaylen Brown's impact, really on offense and defense, and just like setting the tone? Like his style of play has really shown up for how the game's kind of been flowing.
yeah. I mean, one of the things we talk about often is in the postseason, right? The defense ratchets up in a really big way, and it's often tougher to kind of maintain efficiency. Jaylen Brown has 7 straight games greater than 50% from the field. 9 of his last 10 are greater than 50% from the field. He shot 59% from the field against Cleveland. He's at 52% against Indiana and 55% against Dallas. He was 52% in the opening round against Miami. This is a guy who shot 50% from the field during the regular season. So, I mean, he's improved his shooting efficiency in every single playoff series. He's been
Hmm.
remarkably consistent. And then you add in the defensive responsibilities that he's taken on by being the primary defender on Luka Doncic and taking on that task as well. A true star level playoffs for Jaylen Brown. He was the Eastern
Hmm.
Conference Finals MVP. He's looking like he's going to be the NBA Finals MVP. There was a lot of
Hmm.
chatter in coming into the season about his contract, right, being the highest paid player in the league. There's a lot of chatter about whether after last season, whether Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown could figure it out together, and whether there were going to need to be, kind of adjustments made. It's all gone. All the chatter's gone. Jaylen Brown is showing himself. I mean, he's playing like a top 10 player in this league right now.
Hmm.
And when you have two top 10 players in the league, you usually win titles. That's usually how this stuff goes. So, I mean, it's been magnificent growth from Jaylen Brown during the course of this playoffs. He was the guy that in the finals against Golden State was really targeted for his lack of handle, for his inefficiencies. He's erased all of those doubts and all those concerns
Hmm.
and just been fantastic all finals and deserving to be the favorite of the finals MVP going into game 4.
Yeah, just continues to kill on drives. He shoots like 60% on drives, like almost every game, including last night. I think he was right at 60. So just been so good. And guarding Luca well enough. Luca's gonna Luca, but considering he's gone through, go on down the line who Luca's, had guarding him. Jade McDaniels, Lou Dort, Terrence Mann's pretty good defender, and Jaylen Brown's hanging around while making a big impact on offense. Imagine saying, Jay McDaniels, Terrence Mann, and Lou Dort impacting offense. They just don't. So really
Yeah.
one of the best two way performers. The fact that he's even to the Luca hasn't gone off, and Luca hasn't gone off all playoffs. We don't need to talk about that, but he's been great. I thought Tatum played okay. So, he kind of had the ISO game going a little bit. Did drive again. We like to see that. The passing was still pretty good overall. I think I should mention. I think Jaylen Brown had 14 potential assists again. Like the passing's just been so good. But yeah,
Yeah.
I thought Tatum played well. But he got aggressive on offense. We like to see that. But yeah, I don't really have much to say. I thought he played great. But just Jaylen Brown was just so good.
Yeah, and Brown was one kind of closing out the game as well. He had a really good fourth quarter. Tatum struggled a little bit in the fourth quarter. I thought Tatum was really kind of carried the water of the first half and
Mm-hmm.
into the third quarter. I'm surprised looking at the box score, I'm surprised he only had 6 rebounds. It seemed like he had a lot of good contested rebounds down
Yeah.
low, fighting off Gafford and Lively for offensive boards down there. We've talked about the defensive responsibility that he's taken on guarding the center in this series and in the Indiana series, and no complaints from him. I thought he had the jump shot working a little bit. I thought he fell in love with the jump shot a little bit in the second half, which is, the criticisms of Jason Tatum. But ultimately, like I said, he had a good drive and finish somewhere in the 2 to 3 minute mark that kind of like restabilized Boston offensively. And in general, these guys did enough, and they're playing very, very well defensively, both Jaylen and Jason, and with the responsibilities that they're asked. And then you get into Drew Holiday and Derek White and those guys. Just it's like winning play after winning play after winning play.
Yeah.
When you talk about those two guys during the course of the series, and you think back, like I can think back of one shot between the two guys that I'm like, that was kind of a bad shot, and it was the Drew
Mm-hmm.
Holiday 3-pointer yesterday that tried to stem the tide. You could tell Drew was like trying to take it on himself.
Mm-hmm.
It was the one bad shot I've seen from these two guys in like 3 playoff series. I mean, they just make every right play kind of consistently. Obviously, bring so much on the defensive end as well. And Derek White, after a really slow first half, thankful for us as well. We took the over
Mm-hmm.
14 and a half points on him. He was just at 3 at halftime, but he closes out really strong, has a really nice end of third quarter and into the fourth quarter to kind of stabilize things, make some big threes when he needs them after struggling with his shot in the first half. So all down the roster with this Boston team. And Xavier Tillman did a great job last
Yeah.
night in his minutes. He's a guy that in his time in Memphis was known for being a very, very good pick and roll defender, just naturally because he has really active hands and he can kind of get in the passing lanes. He spaced out to the 3-point line, hit his first 3-point attempt
Mm-hmm.
of the playoffs as well. Something that we talked about, was a potential loss that they'd have without Kristaps Porzingis. And he doesn't bring the same rim protection as Kristaps Porzingis as well. He's not the same caliber of player of Kristaps Porzingis, but I thought he did an admirable job in his
Yeah.
minutes and bought a little bit more time for Al Horford not to have to get into those upper 30s. So this is just a team effort, throughout whoever they've called on. And I also wanted to highlight Sam Hauser, who
Yep.
you know, it's the the Shaq meme of I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of your game in terms of isolation defense. Sam Hauser,
Mm-hmm.
both Pritchard and Hauser have really held up well in isolation this series, and Hauser's been really competitive at denying the ball as well and making Luka really work for the ball. They started off the series where they were bringing late help to try to protect Sam Hauser. Of late,
Mm-hmm.
they've just left him alone on the island, and he's been fine. And
Mm-hmm.
so those were two guys I was really concerned about in terms of how they'd be able to get picked apart in the series. They've held up more than fine. Sam Hauser has been good defensively in this
Mm-hmm.
series. And I did not expect to say that. So I want to shout out Sam Hauser, who is one heck of a bench player. I mean, him and Peyton Pritchard have been
Yeah.
great all year long. Hauser's shooting is obviously the thing that we focus on, but he's been an adept rebounder as well. And now the defensive side, where he's been more than competent, which the concern was, can you just be competent out there for the 10 to 15 minutes that you're going to play on a night?
Mm-hmm.
He's been great this series.
Yeah, they left him again. Like all his makes were just so open. So I don't that was a mistake by Dallas. They had a couple defensive mistakes, and I don't know how they didn't do it. Like I talked about catch and shoot again. Like I don't know how they gave that up so often again. But I digress. But like besides Pritchard, everyone played really well. I would say so. Yeah. Anything you want to add on just Boston? I think we kind of covered it. I do want to talk about Kyrie. I was going to kind of
Yeah.
go there. He had it going, man. I was kind of all over this. Talked about it all on the DFS show that he was getting his shots and he finally got them. Buried his jumpers. Had the ISO game going. Drove again. 16 shots off drives again. Leads the finals in shots off drives. You would not think that when Luka Doncic is playing next to him. So Kyrie was really good. Actually going back to a point you made earlier, I think Kyrie's been pretty good defensively. I thought his defensive impact at
Yep.
OKC was really good. I didn't think last night he was a problem at all. I don't think he's been. If you go on down the line, I would say, number one, catch and shoot discrepancy. Number two, Luka's defense, and kind of going. I'd come to
Yep.
like 10 or 11 if I'm like, oh, Kyrie's defense is why they're losing. Kyrie's offense would rank above Kyrie's defense.
Yes. Correct.
But
I agree.
but yeah, I thought he played well, and it was kind of obvious he was going to play well to me. So anything on Kyrie?
So I always find it funny when guys have their offensive game going and they're getting interviewed and they're asked like, what's the difference? And they're like, oh, I just came out more aggressive. It seems so cliche to me in so many times, but this was the one instance where it felt legitimate. It felt like Kyrie was more decisive in his first step and getting to his spots and kind of identifying exactly where he wanted to get on the floor. It seemed like in the first two games he was sort of exploring where he was trying to get on the floor, trying to figure out where his spots were going to be against against this Boston defense. It felt like in Game 3 he had a more acute plan of where he was trying to attack on the floor. So you saw him kind of dribble up into some pull-up jumpers from three. Whenever he got space, you saw him kind of dribble aggressively, get somebody on their back feet, and then elevate. You didn't see as much kind of indecision with the ball, which I thought we saw in the first two games. So, yeah, I thought he was fantastic offensively. And I agree defensively, he's held up much better. I will say this series, I don't think he's been tested as much because the hunting has been so focused on Luka that, he just hasn't been tested in the same way that I thought he might be tested. But I agree that he's generally kind of held up well on that end. And obviously, he had a big responsibility once Luka fouls out with 4 minutes to go to try to carry this team that was now relying on Tim Hardaway Jr., who we've talked about wanting to see more of at the expense of Maxi Kleber. Tim Hardaway Jr. was a minus 19, minus 16 in 19 minutes, one of those two. Minus 16 in 19 minutes, 0 for 3, 0 for 5 overall. We talked on the DFS premium show about Tim Hardaway Jr. and what we would like to do as a coach of Tim Hardaway Jr., which is, get him out there for 4 or 5 minutes, get a couple of those 3 looks, see if they go in. If they go in, you roll him more. If they don't, you get rid of him because he is a huge defensive liability if he's not making shots. Jason Kidd couldn't get rid of him. Jason Kidd could not find, and you saw the experimenting, right? 11 different guys play in this game. He could not find
all first half too.
That he was comfortable with. We saw a little Jaden Hardy, we saw a little Dante Exum, we saw a little Tim Hardaway Jr., we saw a little Maxi Kleber, we saw a little Josh Green. He could not find combinations that he was comfortable with. And that's a testament to Boston in terms of their versatility with their main rotation players. And it's also an indictment of this Dallas, team that's mostly role players that are one side of the ball, right? And we talk about this a lot, that in the playoffs, the deeper you get in the playoffs, you need players that can play effectively on both sides of the ball. Dallas doesn't have enough of them, and it's being exploited handily by a Boston team that's very versatile in this series.
Yeah, I mean, perimeter bench players, like the fact that Sam Hauser is so much better. We'll talk about Derek Lively in a second, who's not a perimeter player. But the fact that, we talked about Boston's top 6 being so good, obviously Kristaps included. Like, to get what they got, it's kind of crazy what an impact Sam Hauser had, man. Like, it's kind of nuts. But just they're getting nothing, man. What do you do with that bench? Like, I don't even know what to do. Like, do you play like Omax Prosper? Like, so the guys you're playing are just not help. I'm like kidding, but they're not getting anything out of these guys, man. I don't like, other than playing Luka. Like, you can't play Luka 48 anymore. He's just getting worn down. PJ's going to probably have to play 42, 43. Derek Jones Jr. could talk about that. He got cut down for Josh Green, which I didn't really get that, but I guess those minutes went okay because they kind of had that run going when he was out there. I mean, what do you do if you're Jason Kidd with filling out this rotation? It's just like, it's tough.
I think, unfortunately, what Jason Kidd did is probably what you have to do, in the sense that you have to try to experiment and see who has it going on a given night and have a quick hook, because so many of these players are one-dimensional in terms of what they bring to the table that you need to see if you can catch lightning in a bottle on the other end of the floor for them. So I actually don't mind his experimentation of it. I think he had a correct quick hook on Jaden Hardy. I just don't know if there's a spot on Jaden Hardy in this series. Maybe in the minutes that match up with Pritchard, but I just don't really think there's a spot for him. So maybe pull off that lever. I think if I'm looking at the box score again, the only adjustment that I have is probably too much Tim Hardaway. Once we saw that he couldn't make shots, right? Like, probably Tim Hardaway Jr. should have been around 8 instead of this 19. Maybe more Dante Exum. He only took one shot, made the one shot he made. It was a hammer dunk. That was quite impressive with Dante. Yeah, Dante Exum actually trying to penetrate and attack the rim. Derek Jones Jr., I would have had a longer leash on Derek Jones Jr. Only 16 minutes is kind of surprising to me. And Tim Hardaway Jr. playing more than him. But we talked about Maxi Kleber. I mean, he was a minus 13 in 8 minutes. But he just doesn't have a role in the series. So we keep talking about guys that don't really have a role in the series. Well, you got to play somebody. So this is where I think you kind of got to test hot hands and see if you can find something. I think he lingered a little bit too much with Tim Hardaway Jr. in this one. Would have preferred to see more Dante Exum or more Derek Jones Jr. there. Thought this was a good example of Josh Green playing well enough to earn more of those minutes, and I thought that was deserving. But I think the range on these guys is all going to be pretty wide, and I think unfortunately Hardy and Kleber have just shown there's really not much of a spot for them in this series.
Yeah, and Hardaway to going back to when Luka fouled out, like you knew whoever was subbing in was going to be a big downgrade. It was whoever
Yeah,
subbed in was going to be the worst player on the floor, like by a mile, right? So that's why I was like,
yeah,
okay, whoever they subbed, this is like Boston's advantage was just so big. And yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr. played the Final Four, which was something you would not expect. Like I said on the DFS show, that the Dallas Pods were like dug in on not playing Tim Hardaway Jr. Now you're playing him in the clutch in the most important
yeah,
game of the season, and now you're dead. So I don't know. Like I still think they got to play Exum. We talked about it on the DFS show that
yeah.
he shot like 50. He had like 84 effective field goal percentage on both the big threes during the season. I don't know. I think just got to play him. Kleba's there's like we've been saying, he can't stay in front. He's not protecting the rim anymore. There's just he can't make shots. He's not helping your offense. He's just dead in every aspect. So, but Josh Green played great. I think Josh Green like kind of hashtag earned it. I guess we could talk about Derek Lively now. It was coming. Like I kind of felt like Derek Lively had this in him. Ran really bad. Obviously, Kristaps swung this to me. I thought losing Kristaps really helped him establish his interior presence really on both ends. I thought he controlled the game with his short roll game. Obviously, the offensive rebound had a couple big O boards there. And I mentioned it kind of like in jest a bit, but I don't know. Like, do you just start Lively at this point? Like, I think he's had a pretty big impact just on the whole. I think he was first on the team in plus minus going into the finals here, and I think he still actually he might have lost it. But anyways, like, what do you do with your centers? Do you just start Lively now, or do you just kind of stick with what you've been doing?
I mean, they ended up playing Lively 30 and Gafford
Yeah,
16.
yeah,
Is it, if they start him, is it going to be much different than that? I don't know how much
yeah.
Derek Lively can handle, right? So, like, maybe Derek Lively in the best case scenario can get up to 33, 34. So maybe you're buying yourself a few extra minutes, but
Mhm.
ultimately, I don't think it's a huge point
Yeah.
of movement there. I think it was Lively definitely looked more comfortable out there without Kristaps
Mhm.
Porzingis rim protection in a big way. He was really active, moving around. It's the Derek Lively we've seen throughout the playoffs, which has been really impressive. And the
Mhm.
one thing to note, while we're being harsh on Dallas, and Dallas is in a dire situation here coming into the season. If we had said Dallas is in the NBA Finals, Derek Lively looks like the legit solution at center for a long time to be paired
Mhm.
with Luka Doncic. And Dallas is getting closer to being able to unload that Tim Hardaway Jr. contract and be able to make more roster additions to him. We'd be like, that's an amazing outcome for Dallas this year.
Mhm.
And I think that's ultimately like what we have to take a step back and take in perspective, that this Dallas team is probably a little bit ahead of schedule, just in
Yeah.
terms of the kind of constant rebuild and remixing that they've been doing on the fly here. But Lively's been exceptional, was exceptional last night. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, I would still expect him to get the bulk of the
Mhm.
center minutes. He's just got more diversity in his game that he can. He can. I mean, a number of times he was out on an island against Jason Tatum defensively
Mhm.
and held him
Mhm.
to generally tougher shots. Daniel Gafford has a harder time doing that type of stuff. So yeah, I think Lively playing a lot makes a lot of sense. I flag planted Gafford last night because I thought he had been playing really well in the series, but once Porzingis was out, it certainly made it an easier path for Derek Lively to get his feet wet and feel comfortable.
Yeah, it sounds like Porzingis is going to miss. Woj had noted, quote, real doubt he's going to miss. So I don't know.
Yeah, there was another note saying that he could play in Game 4. I have no
Yeah.
idea why he
Yeah.
like. There's just no reason to.
Yeah.
Like, if there's any risk of more significant injury, you're up 3-0. You've played successfully without him a bunch. Like,
Mhm.
I just, if I'm a Celtics fan, I'm already thinking about next year a little bit and being like, hey, like, I don't want to see Kristaps before there's a game 6, maybe at the
Mhm.
earliest. Like, but we'll see on how they handle that.
Yeah, and they were really good without. I forget the stat, but they had like an incredible record during the season without KP. I'm trying to find it really quick. I don't know. Whatever it was good. Oh, there we go. I think it's 30 and 5 without him. So now they're what 10-1 in the postseason too. So yeah, not I don't know much to say. I don't think it really matters. But yeah, anything else? I think we mostly covered it. Do you think we get a game 5? I mean, it feels like such an uphill battle again.
Yeah, it does feel like a really big uphill battle. I think we get a game 5. I think Dallas plays pretty desperate. But these situations when you're down 3-0, they're tough because when you're not going back home and it's like, do we really want to go and extend the season? Or are we ready to get done with the season? Boston has played like they've been taking care of business throughout this series. They took care of business in the sweep in Indiana. So yeah, I think we get a game 5, but it's hard to feel confident in that when the math advantage is so big for Boston. Ultimately, like I'm kind of hoping that we just get one of those games that Luka and Kyrie finally are both getting it going in the same way and they're able to play the full game, which we almost had last game. But yeah, what are your thoughts? You think it's sweep?
I'm kind of surprised that Boston's a 1-point underdog. Looking at the book
Yeah,
right now, so I don't know. I kind of think it's over. Like Boston didn't play that great, like they
yeah,
just game planned the hell out of it. Like they've out game planned them in 2 of the 3, and the other one they didn't. They beat the hell out of them. So I don't know. I
yeah,
don't see it, but like I say all the time, I could research for 10 hours on this game more, and Luka Doncic could just go Luka Doncic, and it's all out the window. So
right.
it's all Luka. The fact that we need to rest Luka on offense really just shows what a mismatch this is from a game plan and strategy standpoint. Like your best are people say Luka's the best offensive player. A lot of people do. And they're not. I mean, you can make a case for it, right? The fact that you're willing to rest him, I don't know if that was just like, you got to be better on defense or whatever the messaging was, but the fact that
Yeah.
that's a concern is just screamed to me. I was like, I could not believe my ears when I heard that comment. But yeah, I kind of think
I,
so.
I inter I interpret that comment as trying to protect Luka in some ways and saying that
Yeah.
like the offensive responsibilities are so big that that's why you're seeing
Mhm.
the defense struggle so much,
Yeah.
and that it's on my shoulders to try to protect him a little bit more. That's how I read the comments from Jason Kidd, who, as we've seen during this NBA Finals, has tried his best to use his comments to kind of sway the psychology of the series. But that's how I interpret them, kind of sticking up for his player of like the defense has been this bad because he's having to carry so much offensive load, and we need to find a way to lighten that load a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, do they? I was listening to Zach Glover just a bit before we popped on. Didn't get the whole pod, but they were talking about how they were kind of playing like a zone man kind of hybrid, which I saw that. I didn't. It wasn't like a true zone, which I had tweeted about. Boston is first against zone, and Dallas is
Yeah.
third worst in playing zone defense. But it was okay. Like again, Boston only scored 106. This Mavericks offense
Yeah.
again can't score 3 games, no 100 points. So Boston's defense has just been too good for them. So, defense wins championships. Feels like that's a pretty relevant phrase at this point. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say if you have anything else.
No. We'll see if Monday's episode is previewing a game 5 or recapping a season that would have been an
Yeah,
uneventful end of the season. I mean, gosh, if we end the conference finals with just one win from the losing team in the conference finals and finals, that would be a really disappointing end to what's been a
man.
fun season. But yeah, we'll be back on Monday to either preview game 5 or recap the world champion Boston Celtics.
Yeah, we've been, talking about a lot of injuries, but we had some really good series, had some fun game sevens along the way. But yeah, this could be the last pod of the year, which is pretty crazy. So yeah. Anything else to promote? If you could still subscribe to our DFS product. If it'll pay for itself, just follow what Dink says.
Yeah, unfortunately, results not guaranteed. But yeah, if you're interested in checking out our content, I would suggest at this point in the season, with just one, maybe 2 games left, focusing on the free content side of things.
Yeah.
Which, if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, please leave a rating and review. That helps us, helps circulate the podcast within the algorithm, and also helps give us feedback on how to continue to improve this podcast. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, and seeing our smiling faces, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel there and get a notification by hitting that bell whenever new content goes live.
Yep. Should be fun. I saw Underdog already launched double dribble, typical Underdog.
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
not. That'll be a bit before we get to that. But yeah, Underdog, man. They love the tournaments. All right, so that's gonna do it. Again, we'll catch you on Monday, regardless, and hopefully we get a game 5. This has been fun. I love Boston from a strategy standpoint. So just enjoying the basketball, and we'll miss it when it's gone for sure. So appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you guys next time.